To provide opening remarks. Please ensure that your questions and your remarks are through the chair. And with that, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the invitation to appear this morning. My name is Carol Xavier, as stated, and I am the Chief of the Communications Security Establishment, also known as CSE, and I am joined by Rajiv Gupta, the Associate Head of CSE's Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, we also name Cyber Centre. I'd like to begin by providing the committee with a brief overview of the evolving threat landscape, and then following this, I will speak to the mitigated threat activity which targeted Canadian parliamentarians and how CSC has been working and continues to work to support parliamentarians and protect our democratic institutions more broadly. De plus en plus, les adversaires.
More and more adversaries of Canada are using cyber threats to carry out espionage activities to promote their foreign policy goals and influencing the Canadian public opinion. Even though we believe that cyber criminality is the most susceptible activity that affects Canadian organizations, cyber threats from China, basically, and also from Russia, Iran, and other countries is most significant from a strategic perspective.
The cyber threat emanating from the PRC is significant in volume and sophistication. PRC-sponsored cyber threat actors will almost certainly continue targeting industries and technologies in Canada to give the PRC advantage for their strategic priorities, whether political, economic, security, or defense. In parallel, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 gave the world a new understanding of how cyber activity is used to support wartime operations and has demonstrated how nation-states are increasingly willing and able to use misinformation and disinformation to advance their geopolitical interests. Since 2021, CSC has also observed that state-sponsored cyber threat actors with links to Russia and the PRC continue to conduct most of the attributed cyber threat activity targeting foreign elections. In our fourth iteration of our Threats to Democratic Processes publication released in December 2023, we outlined examples of cyber activity against the democratic process that we have observed globally since 2021, and these include distributed denial of service attacks, or DDoS, against election authority websites and electronic voting systems, unauthorized access to voter databases to collect private information, and spear phishing attacks against election officials and politicians, among others. Given this observed activity, in the last few years, CSC Cyber Center has publicly released over 8 alerts, 4 cyber threat bulletins, and 7 joint cybersecurity advisories with allies, all related to Chinese or Russian state-sponsored cyber activity. Canada's high degree of global connectivity and technological integration with our allies increases our threat exposure. Furthermore, Canada does not exist in a vacuum, and therefore, cyber activity affecting our allies' democratic processes will also likely have an impact to Canada. In relation to committee's study, I'd now like to provide a few brief overview of CSC's role and relationship with the House of Commons IT team. CSC takes its mandate and its legal obligations very seriously. Under the cybersecurity and information assurance aspect of our mandate, CSC acquires, uses, and analyzes information from the global information infrastructure or from other sources to provide advice, intelligence, guidance, and services to help protect electronic information and information infrastructures. Accordingly, pursuant to the CSC Act, CSC and its Cyber Center share intelligence and information with service providers and government clients, including appropriate authorities in Parliament. In June 2022, CSC received a report from the FBI detailing emails targeting individuals around the world, including individuals who have been outspoken on topics relating to activities of the Chinese Communist Party. The report included technical details of the names of 19 parliamentarians who were targeted by this activity. However, from January to April 2021, more than a year earlier, the Cyber Center had already shared reports with the House of Commons IT security officials, specifically detailing a serious matter of technical indicators of compromise by a sophisticated actor affecting House of Commons IT systems. Upon receipt of this information, CSC shared specific and actionable technical information about the activity with the House of Commons IT security officials, and as well the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS. Because of this information, CSC and the House of Commons worked together to thwart the attempted compromise by this sophisticated actor. Nous respectons le fait.
We respect the fact that the House of Commons and the Senate are independent and that their representatives are responsible for determining how and when they directly communicate with MPs, senators. The full chronology of events describing the measures taken by the Center to inform and assist parliamentarians in their efforts to detect and mitigate these things have been presented to the clerk of the committee last week. It's important to note that the commitment of the CSC, working with those responsible for IT in the House of Commons, has been in existence long before the FBI report mentioned above.
The central technical resource for cybersecurity advice, we provide near real-time notifications, including to the House of Commons and Senate IT teams, and have helped parliamentary IT security officials take quick and appropriate measures within their systems to protect their network and users against this and other threats. When a cyber threat has been identified, the Cyber Center sends out different types of notifications, including cyber flashes, which are urgent notifications delivered via email, daily updates about malware and vulnerabilities on a partner's IP space via the National Cyber Threat Notification Service, monthly summaries of National Threat Notification Service data showing how a subscriber's cyber hygiene ranks against anonymized peers in their sector. When requested, we provide cyber defense services and maintain an open line of communication to mitigate potential threats. To detect malicious cyber activity on government network systems and clouds and infrastructure, the Cyber Center uses autonomous sensors, including network-based
Rappel au
sensors.
règlement, Monsieur le Président, je suis sincèrement désolée. C'est sûr que j'ai manqué quand même beaucoup d'éléments.
OK.
Et là, l'interprète,
OK.
je vous salue. Là, ça faisait
OK.
2 minutes que je me disais...
OK, ça va. Je vais juste arrêter pour le moment. Ms. Xavier, if you could try to slow down your speech just a little bit. I think we're just having a gap in the translation, which is making it a little bit more difficult for some members to hear. So I've paused the time. You've got about 3.5 minutes remaining, but if you could do your best, that'd be great. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Janice.
Comme mon collègue parle français, la traduction.
When my colleague is speaking French, the translation is not working at all?
Je parle.
No, when I'm working, now that I'm speaking, I can't hear the translation. I think it's working now. I think so.
Another go, and please, members, as always, if there is an issue with translation, s'il y a un problème avec la traduction.
If there is an issue with interpretation, we will take another little break.
It's remaining.
D'accord, je m'excuse.
Sorry, I apologize.
We provide cyber defense services and maintain an open line of communication to mitigate potential threats. To detect malicious cyber activity on government networks, systems, and cloud infrastructure, the Cyber Center uses autonomous sensors, including network-based sensors, cloud-based sensors, and host-based sensors. These defenses protect systems of importance from an average of 6.6 billion attempted malicious actions per day. CSC continues to monitor Government of Canada networks and systems of importance for cyber threats, and we are working in close coordination with government partners, including relevant security agencies. We deliver foreign intelligence-informed cyber defense. Enfin, j'aimerais souligner aux membres...
And to end, I would like to stress to the members the support we have available for them to support the parliamentarians. The Cyber Security Center has an assistance service, and we also hold frequent information sessions on cyber threats for political parties, and they have a contact in the center to obtain assistance in cybersecurity.
Established 4 unclassified reports on cyber threats to Canada's democratic processes, and our 2023-24 National Cyber Threat Assessment highlights how online foreign influence activities have become a new normal, with adversaries seeking to influence elections and impact international discourse related to current events. Since 2014, interdepartmentally, CSC's Cyber Center works closely with Elections Canada to ensure our election systems and infrastructure remain secure. CSC also continues to work as part of the Security and Intelligent Threats Elections Task Force, SITE. Cyber incidents such as ransomware, DDoS, and supply chain compromises are becoming more frequent across all industry sectors, and these incidents are negatively impacting our prosperity, privacy, and security. And that's why Bill C-26 is so important, because it would give the government new tools and authorities to better bolster defenses, improve security across critical federally regulated industry sectors, and protect Canadians and Canada's critical infrastructure from cyber threats. 4 sectors are subject to the mandatory cyber incident reporting in Bill C-26: finance, energy, telecommunications, and transportations. These were all prioritized due to the importance of both Canadians and to other sectors. They are critical enablers. Bill C-26 will improve our ability to protect ourselves, both from the threats we observe today as well as the threats we will face tomorrow. The federal government intends to launch its updated national cybersecurity strategy, which will communicate Canada's long-term approach to addressing evolving threats in cyberspace. Central to the new strategy will be a shift in focus toward a whole-of-society approach to Canada's national cyber resilience, where public and private entities and all levels of government work in close partnership to defend against cyber threats, including threats to our institutions. The government also recently announced the Defense Policy Update, our North Strong and Free, which proposes a significant new investment in CSC through Budget 2024. Finally, an important aspect of Canada's whole-of-society approach to our collective security includes practicing good cyber hygiene, including safe social media practices, especially in those public roles. The Cyber Center has released guidance on ways to protect yourself online. It has cybersecurity resources for election authorities, political campaigns, and Canadian voters. I really encourage you to take a look at our website, getcybersafe.ca. I would also encourage organizations that have been impacted by cyber threats to contact the Cyber Center so that it can help share threat-related information with partners to help keep Canada and Canadians safe online. Further, to make cyber incident reporting easier for Canadians, CSC is also working with its federal partners to establish a single window solution for reporting cyber incidents, with the ultimate goal to ensure Canadians can always find the help they need. This was a key recommendation in this week from the Auditor General. So to conclude, CSC and the Cyber Center remain active in our collaboration with all partners, including the House of Commons, to improve Canada's cyber resilience and protect our democratic institutions. We will continue to monitor any developing cyber threats and share threat information with our partners and stakeholders as always. Encore une fois, je vous remercie de m'avoir invité à comparaître aujourd'hui.
Once again, I would like to thank you for inviting us to appear before you. We are pleased to participate in this important discussion and give you an overview of the way the CSC and the Center are working to protect Canadians and their democratic institutions every day. Thank you. Thank you.
Start us off for 6 minutes in our first round. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Can you confirm that the government informed House of Commons administration about the cyber attack?
I can, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that when we became aware in 2021 of some anomalies that we were seeing with regards to potential cyber activities towards the House of Commons, that we did indeed inform the House of Commons IT security team.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you told them which parliamentarians were targeted?
What I can say that when we became informed in June of 2022 by the FBI of all of what we were informed by them about the list of parliamentarians, we did indeed share that list of parliamentarians with the House of Commons IT security team, as well as we shared it to CSIS.
Thank you. Did you inform House of Commons administration similarly about the source of the attack?
As mentioned in the chronology, Mr. Chair, that was provided to the clerk, we make it clear there that since January of 2021, we were seeing a sophisticated actor doing some cyber activities towards the House of Commons. And as part of these actions, we provided 12 reports to the House of Commons, and we also held meetings with the House of Commons between ourselves and CSIS. And as part of these various activities, between the meetings and the reports that we provided, we were able to share with them information that was going to be important to be able to continue to mitigate the threat.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, but I'll repeat the question because you didn't answer it. The question was quite specific. Did you inform House of Commons administration specifically of the source of the attack?
So whenever we have a cyber incident, Mr. Chair, the thing we work to do immediately is focus on mitigating the threat. And then once we continue to have addressed the threat, then we, from a CSC perspective, work hard to try and better understand where the threat originated from. As we continue to learn that information, we do share that information with service providers and those that need to know, especially if it's going to be helpful to continue to mitigate the threat.
Yeah, but it wasn't a general question. It was a specific question about what you did in this case. Did you inform House of Commons administration about the source of the attack?
As part of the, Mr. Chair, as part of the various meetings and the reports that we provided, we were able to share what we believed at that time to be the originating source of the threat with the House of Commons IT security staff.
Okay, so that was a long way of saying yes, if I understood your response correctly. You did share with House of Commons administration, according to your testimony today, you did share with House of Commons administration the source of the attack, that being APT 31.
I believe that it would be more appropriate, Mr. Chair, to discuss some elements of the threat in the in-camera portion of the meeting.
Just repeated what you had said in your previous response to clarify it. So we shouldn't need to shift in camera for you to confirm that what you just said a minute ago was correct. Did you in fact tell us a minute ago that you had informed House of Commons administration that APT 31 was the source of the attack? Is that what you said earlier, or did I misunderstand?
So, Mr. Chair, what I shared was that when we know the originating source, or when we have a general understanding of the original source, we do share that information with service providers and those that need to know. And as part of that, we did share over 12 reports with the House of Commons IT staff, as well as held several meetings. And as part of these meetings, we were able to share information that linked to the originating element.
But did you? I don't know what you're trying to say to us, ma'am. I don't think it's a complicated question. It's a clear and specific question. The question is. And people are going to draw conclusions if there's prevarication here. Did you, at some point in a meeting, say clearly to House of Commons administration, the source of this attack is APT 31? Did you or did you not?
So, Mr. Chair, as I said, as part of the many meetings that we held, as well as the reports that we provided to the House of Commons, we provided what was at that time to be believed to be the originating source. We now know, because it is 2024 and have much more information in the collective of knowledge that we have, that this was an actor by the name of APT 31.
Okay, so did you at any point inform House of Commons administration that it was APT 31, and at what point was that?
So because from January 2021 all the way until, I forget the exact date because I don't have the CRON in front of me, but the almost a year in advance of the 2022 time that we got the FBI report, we were aware that APT 31 was the actor that was of concern for us from January 2021. As part of the conversations that we had with the House of Commons and the presentations that we made to them and the reports that we shared, we identified that APT 31 was potentially the actor at that time.
Okay, so you're telling us now at the end of this round that you did inform the House that it was APT 31. Yes or no? Just yes or no?
I think, Mr. Chair, I've answered the question.
So it's a yes, or is it a no?
Okay, unfortunately, Mr. Janis, that is time. Ms. Romanado. Okay, Madame Fortier, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here today. So to clarify this issue, and I would like to go along the same lines. I would like to know, when did you identify for the first time that it was the MPI 31 that was the group behind this threat? Thank you for your question. Chair, as I said earlier, from the start of January 2021, we had seen some activities, anomalies of a cyber nature. These were quite troubling, and we contacted the House of Commons, the analyst, the security analyst, to warn them that we had seen some technical unusual activity. And the more we analyzed and understood what was happening with the 12 reports that were presented, the meetings we had with them, along with our colleagues in the service, we've been part of those discussions. We have informed the House of Commons. We said there was an actor or someone in the nation state, and that it was APT 31. So was it done at that time or later? That's what I'm trying to clarify. It's been between January 22nd, 2021, up till with the House of Commons. Yes. Now, when you have these meetings and you're exchanging information, is it because you saw something specific in nature? Was it a group? What types of information do you share with the House of Commons when you see that there is a threat involved? We share a lot of information when we can, especially when it's unclassified information. If it's possible, we can declassify the information to make it easier to share. But I'll ask Rajiv, who took part in some of those discussions, to provide us more information on that aspect. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Intelligence reporting, there's a lot of context and information. And then there's often a tear line. So there's another set of information that you can actually provide to an incident responder or to another organization to be able to actually take immediate action in resolving an incident. So in the lead up to the incident, we would be sharing tear line information. So here is a sophisticated threat actor, which in cybersecurity terms typically means nation state, super important, definitely reinforcing the seriousness and the importance of the event. Here's a sophisticated threat actor, but all we're allowed to share because of the intelligence is here's the technical indicators. And we didn't have the email addresses, so we would share, here are the things to find the email addresses. So that's what we shared with House of Commons, worked with House of Commons collaboratively to figure out, exactly what was going on, because typically you have a thread you need to pull.
The House of Commons, that you're trying to find out what's happening. So which role is it? The House of Commons needs to come back to you and say, here's what we found, or do you have to tell them, let's find something? How is that relationship?
So we started the thread pulling saying, hey, this is what we know. You can go find your emails. We didn't have the emails. We had the thing to look for the emails with, right? So they would go and look for that. So that's what they did, and then they came back with that information. And every time we found something new, well, you understand the scope of the incident. And that's how we work collaboratively with House of Commons, and we've worked collaboratively with House of Commons for a decade or more, right? So.
Puis pendant cette période de...
And during the time of that incident, did you have regular exchanges? We see the chronology here, which we have received. I think it was circulated to members of the committee. Within this, it says that on 18 February 2021, it was decided that the security center contacted the House, and the management team supplied a list of technical questions to help them to analyze its suspicious activity. Why was it decided that they should play an intermediary role between the CSE and the House of Commons? Thanks for the question, Chair. For us, our role, which we take very seriously, is maintaining the confidential information of Canadians outside of the CSE. Our work is focused on foreign countries. We try to understand the origins of these threats coming from other countries towards Canada. So once we know it's in Canada, normally we would hand over the baton to the service because they have the mandate to carry out certain things in Canada. We try not to intervene. We make sure we don't handle the private data of individuals. So So there was an incident that had to be managed here in Canada. And my last question, and does the CSC know whether parliamentarians were followed up to make sure that they received notifications and understood the measures to be taken, or did they have questions on the threats themselves? Just in 25 seconds. As my colleague said, Rajiv said, there is a constant relationship when we're trying to manage an incident with an industry. So I wouldn't say other colleagues, it's service providers, but it just means that when we're working with an institution, that is constant dialogue to better understand the threat, and they also provide us information. But often, not in the case of the House of Commons, an organization could manage everything internally and only inform us at the end, or maybe never inform us. Thank you, Madame Fortier. Thank you, Madame Gaudreau, for 6 minutes. Maybe I'll ask questions. I didn't hear everything clearly in your preliminary reports. The Canadian Telecommunications Centre, your mandate is to protect the digital infrastructure, as you said, and your clients are the government, the public administration, national defense, and some corporations, as you mentioned. Is that the case? Thank you for the question. Our mandate is to protect governmental systems, critical infrastructure, but we do have a national mandate as well as an international mandate. So even if our mandate is not directly to protect individuals, on our website you can find information on how to improve the cyber security of individuals. But our mandate is to protect Canadians, the country, and stressing administrations, industries, critical infrastructure, the government communication systems. Well, seeing that we are going through some very significant situations, there are significant stakeholders, MPs specifically, are they part of the list, of your list? Yes, I would say since 2019, we have put in place, especially for members of parliament, the possibility of receiving assistance from the Cyber Center, especially when they have issues related to cybersecurity incidents. Yes, that's part of the services we offer, but it's important that they contact us if they require our support. So could you explain what does that really mean? As I said earlier, we make sure that we don't collect private information of Canadians. If a Canadian wants to contact the Cyber Center, or an MP wants to contact the Cyber Center for support, everything must be done the right way, follow the right procedures, make sure we don't get into the private information, but we provide support to manage the incident. And in terms of the information released, do you think the administration has sufficient details to work, or sufficient details to work with MPs? I can't answer for the House of Commons administration. I think it's the best place to answer that. But as Rajiv said, we have an excellent relationship with the House of Commons administration. We've been working with them since 2012. Things have only gotten better. And we have put in place an MOU to make sure that the relationship continues to run smoothly. And specifically on this MPR, we received the people in the House administration. I think the information divulged wasn't sufficient. It seemed like we were trying to find a needle in a haystack. In terms of protocol relevant information, I it seems that things have really evolved with the identification of MP 31. Is it enough for them to do their work? I'll ask Rajiv to answer this. He was fairly much involved, so he can give you a better summary.
Implications, as I mentioned, we shared, a series of reports over the first few weeks that would help us, pull a thread and understand what was going on. After that, this was 2021. This was pre-vaccine COVID, right? So it was very difficult to get people into rooms necessarily. We were working, but not necessarily everyone was in the office. So we booked a classified meeting to actually make sure that the full implications were actually met. And we can talk about that maybe in the in-camera, but that's how we go about it. We share the information we can, and then we try to book classified meetings to make sure that all the full context is well understood.
OK. Concernant le rapport.
As far as the FBI report in June 2022, my question is quite simple. Have you enough human resources and the technical capacity? Because as you mentioned, things are evolving very fast, how the different strategies are so clearly different. Do we have what is really required? Thank you for the question, Chair. Well, what I can say is that I'm quite proud of my organization. We have extraordinary people working very hard. In the interest of Canadians, and the 2022 budget, we received funding, and this helps us to carry on our activities to fulfill our mandate. And now, with the possible additional funding in the 2024 budget, it will give us an additional opportunity to have resources necessary to do the work for Canadians. For us, this shows the government's trust in our activities and our capacity to deliver on our mandate. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madame Gaudreau.
6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I appreciate you being here with us today. In terms of, and this may be a bit of a repetition, but just so it's clear in my own mind too, you've talked about the first communications with the House of Commons when you found out about the attacks in January of 2021. Our concern, of course, is that there was a significant amount of time, and I certainly understand in terms of the conversations that have been had that you learned more as time went on. And you were reporting that. That's great. The key point, though, I think here is that at whatever point none of this was reported to, right, the individual MPs in question. This is what we have to investigate. This is what we have to determine if this is the problem. Can you just go over again, for my own sake, why it's so important that there's almost that divide that occurs, that space where you're not directly communicating with the members once it's determined that there is this sophisticated actor, as you've labeled them. Why that intermediary position is so important. Why there couldn't have been maybe a joint communication with the members of Parliament that were impacted, and maybe if you're looking at the advantages of that or the disadvantages of that, because this is constantly a learning process, I understand that as well, and how maybe things will change in the future, or how you're considering how we move forward from this.
So thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So one thing that's worth mentioning here is we work really hard to try and ensure and inform Canadians and businesses as much as possible with the various publications that we put out. As mentioned, since 2017, we've put out over 3 threats of democratic processes, but in addition to that, 4 national cyber threat assessments, which are documents that help highlight some of the threats that we're seeing and observing based on a whole bunch of research, as well as of the observations that have occurred in Canadian systems as well. With that, one thing we also do is we do actually hold quite a bit of information sessions, and we've held some with parliamentarians supported by others like the service, supported by the RCMP. And so we're very happy to be able to do joint information sessions with whoever would like us to be present to be able to educate on the cyber security domain in particular. Because the more people are aware of what the threats are, the more resilient we become as a country and as individuals. And so the issue, though, is we really are respectful of the independence of the House of Commons and the Senate, and we're really respectful of the role that the House of Commons administration plays in supporting parliamentarians. And so this is why we go through them, as we do for many service providers and other institutions that we deal with. We go through them, and we're at their service if they would like to have more support from us. So we would be more than happy to be able to continue to hold sessions with parliamentarians should the House of Commons administration want our assistance to do a joint session. We're definitely available to do that. As a matter of fact, the Public Safety Department has been in touch with Sergeant Arms, and there are 3 sessions currently scheduled for caucus that we'll be part of, for example, with Public Safety as well as the RCMP and the service. So to show you that these are services that we are prepared to do, but we are just trying to continue to be very respectful of the processes that are in place, and more importantly, the independence of the House of Commons in this role.
And I certainly appreciate that. I know that our caucus is getting our briefing, I think, next week. But that's more of these info sessions. They're very much general, and it's very, very different than when individual MPs themselves are targeted. And again. Is there a shift in terms of, and I understand absolutely the independence of Parliament is key, but that's actually what we're talking about here in terms of the threat that has been, or this potential breach of privilege that has been the concern of these studies and this meeting. That's what's at stake here as well. So to make it more specific. Is there an idea that we've learned from this was a problem? Clearly the people involved were not told in the way that they need to. Are there changes that are being made to ensure that that breach of privilege potentially is not a future issue?
No, thank you very much for the question and the clarification, Mr. Chair. We are an organization that considers ourselves very much a learning organization. So we continue to look for ways to improve. This is part of that learning, to be able to see where we can improve our processes, in addition to all the external review bodies and various reports that are going on with regards to other issues like foreign interference. So we will continue to learn from this to be able to improve those processes and work with the House of Commons to be able to identify a better way forward. When it comes in general, though, when it comes to us identifying an individual that may be impacted by a cyber incident because we learned it from a foreign source, we pass on that information in general to the service, as I mentioned earlier, for the reason that then now this becomes a domestic issue and that is not within our wheelhouse, and nor is it the way in which we function to respect our act. Sometimes the RCMP will be engaged, especially if it's going to be something that requires a law enforcement lens. And in this case, we did pass it on to the House of Commons as well as the CSIS for them to be able to pass on the information to the necessary MPs.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matheson. Okay, folks, we are entering our second round. Mr. Jennis, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I do have to just start by saying, in response to the round of questions with Ms. Matheson, that I find it laughably ridiculous to say that the government institution has so much respect for parliamentarians that they kept secrets from those parliamentarians about their own safety. That's not how you manifest respect in the relationships that I'm a part of by keeping vital secrets from people. Ma'am, when Parliament was briefed about aspects of this threat, did you expect the House of Commons IT department to inform members of Parliament about the specific threats?
Thank you for the question. Our understanding, or yes, I guess my expectation would be that if I'm passing on information to a partner, that a partner will do what is necessary to address the content of the information that is provided.
Sorry, ma'am, you really prevaricated in my last round, and I'm going to push you more because prevaricating in response to questions is a matter that touches on the privileges of parliamentarians. It was a very specific question. Did you expect them to brief members of Parliament who were threatened about these threats?
Mr. Chair, when we pass information on, the expectation is that it will be of use to others, and the expectation would be that, given that we shared a list of names, that somebody will act on it, whether it's to CSIS, and in this case,
that's not the question. That's not the question at all. It wasn't about whether you expected them to act on it. House of Commons IT's job is to protect the IT system.
Sorry, Mr. Jennings, just one moment. I've got a point of order.
Sure, I'm
Mr.
interested in
Collins?
the answers, and I don't think the witness has been given full opportunity to provide.
Then use your round. Come on, learn the rules here, Mr. Collins.
Just have some.
I have 5 minutes. Then you have
level of
5 minutes.
decency here in terms of allowing the witness to fully answer a question.
So, Mr. Collins, I hear you on the point of order. Mr. Jennings, I would ask that when a member is raising a point of order, you allow them to finish. I did stop the clock, Mr. Jennings, so the point of order has not caused you a loss of time. There are 3 minutes and 10 seconds remaining. I turn the floor back over to you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. If Liberal members aren't interested in drilling down to get to responses, that's on them, and that's evident from this disruption. To the witness again, it's a very specific question. The specific question is, did you expect House of Commons IT to take that information and go and brief parliamentarians who were threatened?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass on the information to, I'm going to ask if Rajiv would like to answer, given, as I said, he was present at the time, and in terms to have a better understanding of what the expectation
Is that because you don't know? I'm happy to hear from him, but is that because you don't know the answer to the question?
Mr. Chair, it's because I wasn't personally present. My expectation is, yes, that if I'm passing some information on to an institution or a House of Commons, that they are acting on it and that they're taking that information.
But you understand that that's not the question. The question is not whether they were going to act on it. The question is whether they were going to pass that information along to parliamentarians. Like, you can't even tell me if you expected them to pass the information along to parliamentarians. That's the question. Did you expect them to take that information and tell me and others about it?
Mr. Chair, when we passed on the information, including the names, when we became aware of the names in June of 2022, our expectation is that we gave them the information as well as actions that could be taken to mitigate, and that they would act on it.
Again, you're not answering the question. The question is not if you expect them to act on it. The question is if you expected them to brief parliamentarians. Did you expect them to brief parliamentarians, yes or no?
Mr. Chair,
yes or no?
One of the actions was to brief parliamentarians as part of the actions, then the expectation is, yes, that they would have done that.
Was that one of the actions? Did you suggest to them that they brief parliamentarians? So it's a yes or no.
So I was not present at the discussion. However, I have worked with HOC in the past. So expectations are based on evidence.
It's not about what you did in the past. I'm just looking for a yes or no answer to a simple question, and I'm trying to get to it in 5 minutes. And just because of who you work for, you're not exempt from the requirements to answer questions at parliamentary committees. So this is the question. Did you expect and did you communicate an expectation to House of Commons officials that the information would be shared with parliamentarians? Yes or no?
In working with the HOC, they have stressed from day one, over the decade plus that we've worked with them, that the independence of HOC is super important. They understand their clients. We've worked with them many times. My understanding is that having worked with them in the past on incidents and seeing what has happened, is we have discussed this with them, and they have gone and done that job. So based on past evidence, my expectation was that we would have that same discussion, and that based on their understanding of thresholds, I don't know the threshold when HOC, the Sergeant of Arms, will go and actually brief.
So did you communicate an expectation or not, or did you?
We communicate the threat and the context. So understanding this is the exact threat.
So you didn't communicate an expectation?
An expectation to go and brief? We wouldn't tell them to go and brief. You have to go brief now. We would tell them this is really important and your members are at risk. Okay. These are types of things that we would say.
Thank you.
We don't say go and brief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jenis. That's the end of the 5 minutes. The floor will now go to Ms. Romanato for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. We received the chronology of events that you provided us. Thank you very much for that. And based on the chronology and your testimony today, it appears that the communication between the Cyber Center and the House of Commons IT was pretty much almost a one-way dialogue. I'm seeing repeated indications that the House of Commons IT did not provide you back with feedback or did not provide the Cyber Center with follow-up despite requests. Could you confirm that that in fact was the case between the 22nd of January when you started to see this activity and the time that the FBI provided the report? Is that correct?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I will ask Rajiv to answer that question, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, from our understanding, I mean, you can see the chronology, the timeline is laid out. We were reaching out for information. We don't know what happened on the other side in terms of how long it takes to get that information. As I said, it's a collaboration. We've worked well with the HOC in the past and have tons of respect for their folk. I think that when we did get together to meet, information was shared. So there was that sharing of information. You can see on the timeline as to when that occurred.
If I may, I would simply add that it's not abnormal, even in any cyber incident that we deal with, especially with a critical infrastructure or a private sector company, that the information is perceived as one way, because they are managing their issue and they're living it. And so it's not abnormal for them to take the time they need to eventually get back to us or possibly not tell us. This is how that sometimes happens.
One item I would like to add, though, is that this was a very sophisticated threat actor on HOC networks. And what we found was the very early stages, right? The tracking links are the first stage. Next stage would be a dropper. The next stage would be actual, like, real exploitation software that would have been very serious. So I think what we would like to reinforce as well is that the steps taken between HOC and ourselves prevented a compromise of HOC networks by this sophisticated threat actor.
So one thing you're mentioning is HOC networks. But we understand that in the case of MP Genius, it was actually his personal email that was also targeted. And we understand from House of Commons IT that they're not monitoring, obviously, members of Parliament personal emails. So I'm assuming CSE has capabilities to see, regardless if it's HOC email addresses, if it's a personal address, and you don't have to divulge how you do what you do publicly, but there seems to be a gap somewhere because members of Parliament obviously have personal email addresses to do partisan activities and personal activities. So in this case, there seems to have been a gap between who was flagging to the MP that their personal email was being hacked, or not hacked, but receiving spam mail. With the rest of my time, I'd like to turn it over to MP Collins because I know he has some questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the witnesses for their attendance today. I guess one of the first question I have is in terms of, you talked about a team approach, and Mr. Gupta talked about the decade-long relationship that you have working with partners. You mentioned the word partner several times in your opening. It's a team environment. But someone mentioned in one of the responses to the questions a memorandum of understanding. Why was that put in place, and does it address any of the questions and issues that have been raised in today's meeting or last meeting?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So when we're going to be doing work with an entity in particular that is in Canada, or any entity where data may be exchanged, and we may need to collect that data to be able to do some analysis, to be able to identify the threat in a better way and better understand the origins, a memorandum of understanding is often put in place, or an instrument of some sort to really clearly outline how the information will be shared, why it's shared. And this is, again, linked back to the fact that our mandate works really hard to protect privacy of Canadians and not infringe on those rights. And so, and in particular, especially as an organization may take on perhaps some of our services that we offer, as I'd mentioned in my opening remarks, where we provide services of host-based sensors, network-based sensors, and cloud-based sensors. And depending on the services that one takes on, that is the other reason why an MOU would be put in place. Because again, the exchange of information that is happening or possible support to a monitoring element so that we can continue to educate, learn from it, and again, clearly outline how the data is being managed.
And does
Mr.
that...
Collins, unfortunately, that's the time, but I do have you for 5 minutes at the very end of this round. Okay. Madame Gaudreau, 2 minutes 30 secondes.
J'ai trois.
I have 3 questions in 2 minutes. Let's see how far we go. Earlier, I was reassured, Mr. Chair, when I asked if we had sufficient human resources and so on. 11th October 2023 wasn't such a long time ago. CBC mentioned that the CSE was going through a crisis. We're trying to be constructive. There was a 180-degree switch, and today you're telling us that you can adapt if the law is modified. I'm not too sure what article you're referring to in terms of CBC, but Mr. Chair, I can tell you that I did an interview with Ms. Bureau. We discussed the issue of resources and some of the talents we need at the CSE. And even during that interview, I said that some of the skills we need go beyond just the cyber center's needs. These kinds of talents are in high demand in Canada and across the world, given the new digital environments. And another piece of information I shared, I think it's useful, is that there is a lot of interest in the CSE. That's why we feel confident in being able to find adequate resources with the new funding we'll receive. And so how is it we're here today with my colleague, Garnet Genius, that had some information divulged? And where were we looking into this just today? What has to be corrected? You have about 30 seconds to try to answer. As I said earlier, we're an organization that is in a continuous learning process. We're trying to improve our methods. Obviously, the study you'll do would come up with some recommendations, and we will be able to do better. We are not a policy development organization. We have actions to carry out, and we do our best with it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I would like to invite the CSC to provide us specific events, because you know what you're talking about. At the end of the report, thank you, Madam Gaudreau, and I appreciate that you were also played the chair's role by reminding people how much time was left.
Thank you. Can I just go back to this conversation that was had about information seemingly going one way from CSE to the House of Commons, and you said that this is normal. You will inform an institution, but that you don't. Is it true that you said that you don't expect a return on that information, or you allow them to deal with what's happened? Is that what I heard correctly?
So yes, Mr. Chair, as mentioned, a cyber incident is usually a moment of crisis for an organization. And as a result, what our job is to be there as a support. Sometimes we're the ones contacting an organization to say to them, we are seeing something that is of concern. Sometimes they have identified the cyber incident, and we call them and say anything we can do to help. And sometimes we do have that regular ongoing two-way communication. But often, sometimes a company might choose to have a service provider, an external service provider, provide them the support. And so then we're just more in monitoring and wait and see. So it's not an automatic that an organization will automatically come to us or continue to want to engage with us. It's not because they're not wanting to. Sometimes, especially when you're dealing with cybercrime, you're dealing with ransomware, we don't encourage the payment of ransomware, and sometimes that's another reason why a company might not want to deal with us as a government entity, because they're afraid that that could mean something. Although we are not at all law enforcement, we're not a regulator, we work hard to build trusting relationships, and I do feel that we do that on a daily basis, but I don't want to mislead anybody to think that that means that we know all the elements of cyber incidents that happen in the private sector, for example, or with critical infrastructure.
But doesn't that put our critical, and I understand I don't expect there has to be a freedom there in terms of choice, but doesn't that put potential critical infrastructure at further risk if there isn't a follow-up on your part?
We actually do continue to follow up with the entities. We continue to call them or work with them. And I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that there aren't relationships that exist. On the contrary, we have very great relationships with critical infrastructure, especially the energy sector, the telecos, the banks, where we meet with them regularly to talk about threats and to learn from each other about what threats they're facing. So there are great relationships and governance bodies that exist to be able to work through understanding. Having said that, though, we will continue to support and offer our support, but we can't force them. And this is where, as I said in my opening remarks, Bill C-26 is really important in 4 of the critical infrastructure sectors that have been identified as part of that bill, because they're really important to Canadians in the critical infrastructure space.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matheson. Mr. Jenis, to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. To the witnesses again, did you impose any caveats on the information you shared with the House of Commons?
What was that question again?
Caveats.
Did you impose any caveats on the information you shared with the House?
There is typically on our reports a caveat that'll say, hey, you can't share this further without the explicit authority of CSE. That would probably be the caveat. I'd have to look at the reports.
Okay. So if the reports contained a caveat saying that the information can't be further shared without CSE's permission, then how in the world would they have shared that information with parliamentarians without CSE's permission?
Well, all the information belongs to them, right? If it's their information, that belongs to them under whatever authority, FAA for the rest of the departments. And
That's why I asked you about caveats, though.
that would be in our reporting, in our explicit report. Like I said, we didn't even have the emails, so we would share the key to go find them. They would find them, and they'd have all free reign to go and share that.
Okay, but if you shared, I think it's important that you come back specifically with what those caveats are.
The caveat to not restrict a system owner from sharing anything with their people.
But we're talking about information you shared with them, right? So the government has said that they had information about members of parliament facing threats, including the source of those threats. You've just acknowledged that in the process of sharing that information with the House of Commons, you likely included an expectation that they wouldn't share that information with others without your consent.
So, Mr. Chair, I would reject the premise of that statement.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I just said what you said.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, what my colleague was saying is that.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to hear what he was saying from him, actually. What were you saying, sir? Was there a caveat attached, or was there likely a caveat attached, as you said a minute ago, that information couldn't be shared without CSE's agreement?
They could always ask us if they wanted to share something specific from the report. Outside of the report, they have access to all of their IT systems, all of the information that they shared.
Did they ask you if they could share any information?
No. But,
okay.
But if they did, and we have done
so
this many
here's
times,
the problem,
many times in the past with HOC.
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président, comment...
A point of order, Chair. How do you expect interpreters to do their work when you have two conversations going on at the same time? Thank you, Madam Gaudreau.
Can do your best. I appreciate that you want to direct your questions where you want to direct them, but I do think I'm not going to take time away from anybody if there's a talking over and that's taking away from clarity of an answer. I'm not going to hold that against anybody, but I do think that we just have to play it smoothly here in terms of how we're conversing so that the interpreters can do their job. I have stopped the clock. There does remain 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and I do hope that all those that are speaking will afford the time for the person asking the question or responding to it to do so properly. Thank you.
Okay, so like this is why this situation is bizarre, right? So I'm here with my colleagues Blaine and Eric, right? If I have information that's highly relevant to Eric's life that I should probably share with him, and I say, okay, I'm going to tell Blaine, but I'm going to say, Blaine, don't tell anyone else, including Eric, without asking me first. And then 2 years later, I come back and say, well, it's not my fault I didn't tell Eric. I thought Blaine was going to tell him. When the simplest thing would have been for me to just tell the person affected rather than put it through a circuitous game of telephone with potentially caveats attached that limit the sharing of that information anyways, and potentially without all the information involved. Like fundamentally, the question is, why was all of this sort of nonsense interposed in between the people who had the information, which is the government of Canada, and the people who needed the information, which was members of Parliament under threat who could have taken further preventative action to protect themselves? Why was it so difficult for the government to just tell us directly?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, we take our role very seriously, and we take the privacy of Canadians very seriously, and we take the role that we play with the service providers like the House of Commons very seriously. And we recognize that everybody has a role to play in the process. Having said that, I recognize that we're going to learn from this incident and hopefully get a better understanding, especially from the study that you'll do, on how we might do something differently.
Did you clearly tell the House of Commons that APT 31 was the source of the threat, and when did you tell them that?
So, Mr. Chair, as per the chronology, since January of 2021, we were aware of some activities going on. As was explained by my colleague Rajiv, we progressively started to better understand.
I asked a specific question that's not answered by the chronology. Did you tell the House of Commons that APT 31 was the source of the threat, and if so, when?
Mr. Chair, I do believe we've answered the question that we did tell the House of Commons that through the various interactions that we had with him, that we believed at that time that the threat was APT 31. Having said that, the member asked me what specific time that was, and I'm not able to tell you exactly which exact date that exactly happened.
Could you tell us the month?
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry,
The
Mr.
year?
Jennings, we're already over time here. Mr. Collins,
you can catch it.
Mr. Collins, 5 minutes over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Xavier, you've, I think, painted a picture today that you provide a service to clients, and those clients could be within the government or elsewhere. When you're made aware of information, you provide that information to organizations or departments. I could probably pose the question, this is something that could happen to defense, right? We look at our support for Ukraine and all of the efforts that Russia is doing for those people that still support Ukraine around this table. Russia has taken many approaches to try to undermine our support on that file. And if this happened in defense, you would provide that information to defense as is it a client? Would you consider them as a client in that instance? You'd provide them with information, and then it'd be up to the defense to determine internally what they do with their own security people that they have and their own IT people. Is that a fair comparison in terms of if this happened somewhere else in the organization, you'd take the same approach?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. That is exactly how we function.
And you said earlier, you used the words, you're respectful of the independence of, I think you were referring to the House of Commons staff. What level of independence do they have in this instance in terms of dealing with this? They have their own IT security people. They were here at our last meeting, as you know, and they provided us with evidence. But they're responsible for their area of the organization, and maybe that's not the right term, but I think you understand what I mean in terms of they have their own roles and responsibilities as it relates to dealing with parliamentarians in this instance. Can you talk about what level of independence areas of government have or external stakeholders? Where do you draw that line in terms of you're providing a service, but you're giving that information to the client?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So very much so. We are like a service, as you mentioned. And the intent is to, when we are made aware of an incident or when we see something through the tools that we have, our goal is as much as possible to get the information to the right people for them to act and mitigate the threat first. So what happens in the case of like a Government of Canada system, deputies, for example, are the ones accountable within each of the departments and then with an accountability to a minister. When we pass on that information to an IT department within a government organization, they are the ones that are going to take the necessary steps with our support, as well as Shared Services Canada, for example. Depends on the department. In an industry as well, same, we'll contact the IT organizations and tell them we've seen something and they are to act on behalf of their organization. Often there'll be this back and forth that we talked about before in terms of gathering more information and for them to act. And we do this actually quite regularly because we do this in a pre-notification ransomware initiative that we have put in place with our U.S. partners, for example. So over 500 organizations have been contacted by us at what we call a CISO level, and to be able to thwart an attack before it happens and saving them millions of dollars.
97.
Okay, great. This one's a little unique, right? Lots of drama, as you've heard with some of the questions here this morning. So we're not a normal client, I would say. Can I ask in that regard? I want to go back to the MOU in terms of, all areas of the organization have looked back in terms of what could we have done better, how do we improve things moving forward, right? Does the MOU deal with the communication aspect of, you've heard some questions today about who should have been notified by who and when. What did that new MOU determine as it relates to your relationship with House of Commons staff?
Thank you for the question. I'll have to, I don't want to mislead the committee, so I'd have to go back and reconfirm the contents of the MOU. I can't say that I read it before coming before this committee this morning. So
I think my question would be, going forward, who's to contact parliamentarians if this happens tomorrow?
So again, our expectation is to learn from this incident and work in collaboration with the House of Commons to be able to identify what would be the best way forward so that this is not an incident we see repeated.
Mr. Chair, and pass it on.
Great. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Collins. Colleagues, that brings us to the end. Do you have a point of order, Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a note for future meetings. I know we have one already scheduled for Tuesday with a list of witnesses made public. Going forward, could we get into the habit of having the witnesses provide their opening testimonies to us in advance in both official languages? The witnesses had a lot to say in the opening, and it's difficult for us to follow along. I'm trying to make notes. There's a lot to be said. So can we make that the standard going forward, knowing that this is going to be studied, we know who our witnesses are, that their expectation is they give it to us at least a day in advance, please?
Yeah, fair point to raise, Mr. Duncan. I think let's just suspend. We don't have to deal with this immediately. The point is taken. We're going to suspend. We can chat about how we can be more effective in that process to benefit both members and witnesses and interpreters. Colleagues, we're going to suspend briefly before we head into the second half. Thank you.